Welcome to the Wellness Growth Show, where successful wellness entrepreneurs share their journey, strategies, and insights for building impactful businesses. I'm your host, Scott Schumann, and each week we bring you conversations with industry leaders, transforming their communities through innovative approaches to health and wellness. Today, we're sitting down with Neil Sullivan, co-founder of Nimbus, who will share his experience in the wellness space. Welcome.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Absolutely, man. I'm excited to have you. So let's start off. What inspired you to start Nimbus?
Well, I'm glad you said co-founder because my other co-founder is also my wife and business partner, Sue. And it's interesting doing business with your married partner. To be honest, I probably wouldn't recommend it, nor would she. You have to be pretty rock solid for, to be able to cope with the stresses that come with business life. So it's definitely been a journey. It's definitely pushed us to the brink. But the reason why we started Nimbus was from our own personal stories. And whilst wellness is hot right now, excuse the pun, because I'm a sauna guy, when we started Nimbus, basically we were both struggling with our own personal health journey. I have autoimmune conditions. I have this condition called MTHFR, which they call the motherfucker condition. And it's a genetic defect where I have poor absorption of folic acid and vitamin Bs. So my body struggles to what they call metallate. Sue had Lyme's disease. There's a lot of autoimmune in my family. My granny had thyroid issues. My mum has arthritis. So inflammation is a big issue for me as well. And we're both budding entrepreneurs. I used to work with CBS, the big American tech brand, TV brand, and that was such a creative space, which I really flourished in. And Sue had multiple mini businesses in the wellness industry because she's a nutritionist by trade. I was also a semi-professional soccer player up until last year where I was 39. And so I was kind of in that elite sport level. I come from an advertising marketing background predominantly, but was working in that high-end tier one, working with Googles and Nikes and brands like that. And then Sue had that health background. And we were both entrepreneurial in our mindset, this whole like working for the man, 9 to 5. Whilst I enjoyed my CBS days, I also kind of had this light bulb moment of, like, the biggest deal we ever got across the line in my time was like a $5 million deal with a huge, big computer company. And I remember
Well,
thinking, fuck, this was my ideas, not just mine, but like me and a couple of the team who got this across the line. But like that just goes to some board and dividends and shareholders. And I'm thinking, like, these are my creative ideas that I'm throwing into this. And whilst we were rewarded well in the sense of like being a staff member, it really made me realize going like, if you have your own thing, it's all yours. Now that's easy for someone to say, right? I will put a huge caveat on it. And I see a lot of this online about quit your job and you'll be fine and failure is good and all those kind of things, which in theory, yes. And not to say I don't agree with them, but it comes inherently with a lot of risks and stress and pressure. And this whole thing of like, you get your calendar back and stuff, which in some ways is true. Some people, like, the thing that really bugs me about business is people say, oh, you're so lucky, you can just go and do that. And I'm like, if I decide to take a Tuesday off or go down the coast for a few days, I'm like, yeah, but I'm never off. I'm 7 days a week, 24/7. If there's a problem, I have to be on it.
you're the
So
go-to.
you have to be dedicated to really go into it. And Sue had gone through a few businesses. She sold healthy snacks to corporates for a while. She was practicing nutrition. She did like a scrunchy hair, product brand. So she's got that ADHD brain. So she kind of goes really quickly and doesn't think about, she's like, let's just do it. And then I'm more that kind of structured corporate guy, if that makes sense. And so we kind of marry together quite well, surprisingly. Like it doesn't feel like that sometimes, but um I think because we're opposite in how we work and how we operate, but in terms of the vision of what we're trying to do with wellness and preventative health, we are like this. And that was a long way of answering. We came, I suppose, to the conclusion of infrared because Sue was working in a clinic in Sydney, realized that infrared sauna was actually a really good modality for both of us, Lyme disease and micronutrient that I mentioned. We'd gone on a trip to the US and New York and seen in LA that there were already studios there, but the US is kind of like, a big leader in terms of global wealth anyway. Yeah, when we came back from that trip to the US, we realized nobody was doing this in Australia. Not even was anybody not doing it. No one had really even heard of it. Sue was practicing out of a clinic in Potts Point called Health Space, who did have an infrared sauna there, and her mentor Nick, who's a great guy, he's a big wellness industry person over here, um, kind of tutored her in the sense of like just preventative healthcare generally. And then, but the difference there, I suppose, with their space was a bit more clinical, and it was a kind of an after, so you went in, you had something going on, then they gave you a prognosis of like, go and use the sauna. Whereas we were thinking of, well, what if you flipped it on its head, did it as a lifestyle brand, so think about what happened to yoga and Pilates. At some point in their history, they would have been seen as a bit out there, a bit woo-woo, and not in the too distant future, right? Like Pilates as a practice has only really become ubiquitous in the last 30 years, maybe 30, 40 years. Before then, it was only really if you were specifically into like that kind of type of health. Same with yoga, but yoga probably dates back a lot longer. So we were thinking, okay, well, we found infrared. We know that works. And like new infrared wasn't a new thing either. Infrared has been around in health scenarios for the guts of 60, 70 years. It was the Japanese in the 1970s that first started to use infrared as a form of health modality. And infrared is just a light on the light spectrum anyway. So it's always been around. But in terms of its use for health and wellness, it's only about 50 years old. So it's not a new thing, even though people still today say, oh, it's a new fad. It's like, it can't be a fad. It can't be a fad because it's a light on the light spectrum. So it's always going to be there. It will never go away. And it's been around for, as I said, half a century already in its use. It's only in the last 5 years that it's become a little bit more commonfold with, let's say, the average member of the public. But even at that, I would say there's 24 odd million people here in Australia. I would say if I surveyed them today in terms of, do you know what a sauna is? I would say, a good few people would know, 30% would know what an infrared sauna is. But then if I was to ask people, what actually goes on when you have an infrared sauna, I reckon that would drop drastically into single figures. So whilst it does feel like it's quite common, I still feel like there's a huge way to go from an education point of view in terms of truly understanding what infrared is, what it does, and how often you should do it. And that last piece is a very important question because it's all subjective to you. Depends on what you're trying to achieve with your own personal health journey, whether you're trying to recover from cancer, whether you're a sport athlete, whether it's just everyday use. All those things can play a different role in terms of how often, what temperature, the frequency of how you use sauna. So yeah, it's a very exciting time because we started in 2016 as the first infrared sauna studio in Australia. Fast forward to today, there's a lot more sauna studios and there's a lot more saunas in other businesses like gyms and so forth. But yeah, it's here to stay. If anything, it's just going to go upwards.
What do you think was like the biggest surprise maybe in like your first year of business?
That's a good question. I'm having my tea here. That's part of my podcast ritual here. I've got, if only
Yeah.
your camera could see,
What do
I've
you,
got
I'll have some coffee.
I've got my little Dutchy incense candle here to set the mode. And I'm not like a real spiritual woo woo person. I'll just say as well. And I don't say that in terms of like spite or against anyone who is. It's more for the fact of trying to make wellness as lifestyle and as accessible and as available to everybody. And that's kind of a big thing behind our brand is we've always been open and accessible. It doesn't matter what age you are, what your background is, your beliefs, your weight size, anything like that. It's welcome to all. It's not about bikini bodies or six packs. Every person on this planet can benefit from sauna. So we don't want to ever become a brand that feels like it's too, highfalutin that people can't achieve. And in terms of, good question. I think in terms of surprises, I think it's like when I have a 3-year-old son and I compare it to that in the sense of you have no fucking idea what's coming and you can read all the books and do all the things and be as prepared mentally as you think you can until you actually get there. And that dose of reality, it's like, I used to talk about this in soccer. You can train and do as much as you want, but when you go into a match game, there's that match practice. You can only get match practice from playing matches. You can't get it from training. And that's exactly like going into a business. You go in there, you don't have a clue what's about to go in. And in the early days, it was probably even easier, I would say, because when we started, I was still working for CBS at the time. Sue went full time into the business. So she was on desk, as it were, 6 days a week. I would moonlight on a Monday, Wednesday, and a Friday night, the nights I wasn't soccer training. Then I would train on Tuesday and Thursday. She would take a Saturday because I'd have a game on a Saturday, and then I would do Sunday. And we did that for the first 12 months.
Okay.
And it seems crazy to think I couldn't do that now. But when I started it, it didn't seem bad. Like it didn't feel arduous. I felt like I was earning my skin in the game, sweat equity, people talking about it. And it was a joy to kind of meet people and see people come in. And luckily we did 2 weeks for free when we opened, which has always been a bit of a marketing tactic that's done well. Wherever we open a new studio, we always offer a free testing week or two. And just to see people coming in and asking questions, looking around, what is this, and being able to
your
have
place, and it's
in your
yours.
place. Although, like it's funny to think back, because when we opened, like I took out a personally guaranteed loan of $40,000. We begged, borrowed, and steal from family members. We had an Irish builder friend of mine who kind of did the deal at like pretty much at cost, if not like less than that. For a small piece of investment, which we then bought them out, a year later. And it was basically beg, borrow, and steal. We had furniture from our home, artworks from friends, like everything you could
Whatever you could do to piece it together to get it open.
We had saunas on lay-by, essentially. We were essentially renting them until we owned them. So we literally did it off the smell of an oily rag. And we have photos of that first opening, and we had a dog, Chucky, who sadly passed away only last year at the age of 13, but he was our main marketing tool in the early days.
Your mascot.
Yeah, he sat in the window, people would come in, and there was a huge amount of questioning when people came in, like, really, I would say, oh my God, 1 in 100 people would maybe know what an infrared sauna was. So there was a huge piece, and that was an amazing honor as well, to be the first to bring that to Australia. And in Bondi, you couldn't ask for a better place in the world to try. Like, if it was going to work, it was going to work in Bondi. It'd be like going to Hollywood or someone like that in America. Like, it was really the best place to try and do it. And luckily it caught on, and the rest is history. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So tell me about, like, okay, you said you opened in 2016, right? So you're coming up on, your 9th year, right?
Yeah. So, 9th year this year. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. What's evolved? I'm sure there's been so many changes or just adapting. Like, tell me, can you share some of that?
I think phase 1, let's call it, when we started, was about 2 years of just us, me moonlighting, and then eventually being able to hire staff. And Sue took a lot of the emotional weight, I would say, in the early days. Like, imagine working somewhere 6 days a week and not getting paid. My wage with CBS basically kept us afloat. So this whole thing of like, quit your job and go for it, I actually don't necessarily agree with that.
Don't quit it yet.
Yeah.
Gotta replace the income first.
I think the best scenario is if you can have a side hustle that gets to a certain size, and then you can flick a switch and transition across. That would be my general piece of advice. I do understand that when you quit something and then you're in it, you have to make it survive. So I do agree with that mentality as well. But if you don't have a safety net, like, you still have to pay your rent and do all those things. And I was on a pretty substantial wage with CBS as well. And also we put money in as I went along into the business to keep it going. And without that, it just wouldn't have survived. And we've bootstrapped everything to this point. Like, there's no, we've had investment help from family and friends. Don't get me wrong. We absolutely have. And we did get an injection of capital about a year or two ago from a very special person to us. But if it wasn't for that, we probably would have been gone. But if I was to surmise that phase 1, it was the easy part, if I'm being honest. Like, all that stuff is really tiny in comparison to the more bigger stresses that we face now as you grow. Yeah, we had that phase 1. Then we moved to phase 2, where we started to open a couple of other studios. One was a licensed partner.
Okay.
And then we had a studio in Melbourne. They came 2 years later, essentially, in the same year. Then we kind of steadied at that for a while. Then our manager in one of the studios opened her own studio. That was studio number 4. And then we were kind of steady at 4 for a few years. But when COVID hit, it was a real wake-up call for us from a business model perspective because, well, we're already in the service game, which is always a challenge to scale because even in Bondi, which is our biggest studio, we only have 7 saunas. So we get bottlenecks, you know, someone comes after work hours, you know, it's too busy, they can't get in, they go somewhere else. But then at 11 a.m. on a Tuesday, you know, we're trying to fill up space. So that's always been a problem. And then we couldn't have a sauna digitally, you know, like most businesses were transitioned to Pilates online and stuff, which work, but you can't do that with a sauna. Not yet anyway. I mean, I'm sure, yeah, the old Simpsons reference of, you know, Mr. Burns in a space suit in, you know, the year 2100. Yeah. Like, I'm sure maybe at some point in the future, but it did make us realize that, hey, like our business model is not really that solid. It's very risky. And yes, like it's different if you have a Five Guys burger chain with 1,500 stores. Yeah, that's different, you know, but we're not at that scale yet. And when you have we had 4 studios last year. 4 is not that much, even though people think, this is the other thing, people have an idea of you on the outside. Things are going great. You must be killing it. You've got 4 studios. But like, it's not always the reality on the other side. Underneath, we're like pedaling below the water, like, you know, crazy duck. So there's a lot, you only see the iceberg, and then there's a huge amount that goes down underneath. So when we started to realize we needed to expand, we launched an e-commerce arm, which we call Nimbus Wellness. And we launched that last year, and that has a range of everyday beauty products like face oils, body oils. We have a natural hydration supplement like an electrolyte, and they're all formulated by Sue because she's a nutritionist. So we decided to kind of broach into that product landscape as a way of like, well, what if you're not at the studio? How can we bring that Nimbus ethos of preventative, you know, real living to you when you're not in the studio? And the everyday products are amazing because they're all natural. They've no nasties in them. They're made here in Australia, formulated in Australia, packaged in Australia. You know, it's all and we're a family-run business that's bootstrapped. Like, you really are supporting a small business, family-run, but also what it's good for you and at a price that is affordable. You know, it's really a magic mix from our point of view. And then we have other products like beauty tools, like washes and things like that, which a lot of brands sell, but they're kind of our signature ones. We also do a small clothing range. We do a hemp clothing set. Again, all natural, organic clothing, and people love that. It's kind of lounge wear. We have a baseball cap, solar powered, and then we have some of those beauty tools like dry body brushes, and they're all kind of pseudo linked to saunas in some shape or form. Like, if you think about the hydration supplement, when you have a sauna, you dehydrate, right? So it's important to hydrate. We've always said that. And now we have our own electrolyte that you can have that while you're in the sauna. And also a fun fact about Australians is 80% of Australians are dehydrated every single day because of our active lifestyle and also because of the climate here. So if you're 80% or if 80% of the population is dehydrated, how are you going to perform mentally, physically? And I don't just mean an athlete, whilst athletes are obviously important, but if you're dehydrated going about your day, you're not going to be as mentally focused. You're not going to work as well. You're not going to sleep as well. You're probably not going to eat as well. So it's all those things. So, and again, with our products and the whole ethos of Nimbus is these aren't things that you should take. And we saw a gap in the electrolyte space in terms of everybody knows about hydrolyte. But when you think about hydrolyte, you associate that with, I've got the runs, or I'm feeling ill, or I'm hungover. So I only take
like flu or something, right? You
exactly. You only take it as a kind of a remedy kind of thing. Whereas the whole ethos of Nimbus is like, well, if you do anything like regularly, you're going to get benefits from it. And same with electrolyte. If you should be taking this every single day. And it's one of those things where there's a saying in the soccer landscape, you know, if you have a good diet, it's not going to necessarily make you a better player. But if you have a bad diet, it's 100% going to make you a worse player. And that's how I think about this with health. And my other analogy when it comes to health is think of it like an X and Y axis back to your maths days. So if you do anything positive, whether it's go for a jog or Pilates or meditation, walk, whatever, you're going to get immediate benefits. And the same with a sauna. And for a sauna, it's things like you're going to burn calories, yes, but it's not all about calories. There's things like skin health. You're going to stimulate blood circulation. You might ease some pain relief. You might sleep better on that day. There's a raft of all these immediate benefits. But if you do it consistently over time, and there's 30-year studies coming out of Finland now that are, suggesting this, if you do about 45-minute saunas per week, it reduces your risk of cardiovascular disease and stroke by up to 40-50%. It reduces,
That's huge.
yeah, it also reduces all-cause mortality by up to 40%, some even higher than that. So that's things like Alzheimer's, dementia, cardiovascular disease, I mentioned, all those kind of things, like just diabetes, like just the main things that can cause mortality. It's reducing your risk of coming, into contact with them. So that alone is just ginormous from a breakthrough in terms of studies. And then when you add ice baths into that as well, in terms of mental health, nervous system, metabolism, heart rate, this stuff is not going anywhere. As I said, there's huge amounts of studies online. There's more and more information coming out all the time about, if you're not doing it, you need to do it. And my personal opinion with saunas particularly, and even ice baths, is that in some place in the future, and places like Finland are already there, saunas are going to have to be a prerequisite in everyone's life. You're either going to have them in your house, or you're going to have some way of getting access to them, because our bodies come in touch with things like toxins. There's like 600,000 toxins a day that we come into contact with, and a sauna catapults that process of detoxification. Our bodies can't detoxify quick enough because we put on eau de toilettes and face creams and deodorants, and we're at a petrol station, we know there's gas, there's all kinds of things that we're coming into contact, and our bodies can't detoxify that quick enough. Like if you fly a lot, there's a lot of heavy metals, there's radiation that you're being exposed to. So saunas are like the perfect remedy and the quickest and safest way for you to get rid of all that stuff. So it's definitely here to stay.
Love it. Yeah, I mean, just the health issues that it helps reduce. I mean, I know personally, just family members and whatnot. It's a big problem. It's definitely a big problem, cardiovascular and diabetes and whatnot. Anything you can do to help reduce the chances or just improve your health overall, kudos. That is awesome.
Yeah, they're even saying in America, I saw Tony Robbins speak about this in America, it's made a big breakthrough with obesity, because if you're dealing with a client who's morbidly obese, it's quite difficult to get them, even physiologically, because their joints and they have kind of loads of chronic issues. How do you get someone like that to go for a jog? It's you kind of have to really start with baby steps.
Even walk fast.
Yeah, even getting out of bed or whatever it may be. However, with a sauna, you literally just have to sit there. It puts your body into that false exercise mode. What happens with a sauna is your cells, infrared is different to a traditional. Infrared is a light frequency that penetrates your body. It penetrates you at a cellular level. So it's stimulating your cells, and they kind of crack open and almost weaken. Like when you go to the gym and you do a weight session, you're ripping a muscle and then that muscle repairs. A sauna is doing that essentially at a cellular level. It's cracking them open, and then your cells repair afterwards, but they repair stronger. So they crack, and so imagine that neuroplasticity of cells in every part of your body, not just your bicep. This is every part of your body. You're basically
you're not just hitting one area. If you go to the
you're
gym.
flexing every single cell in your body. Like, that's insane when you think about that. And when I tell people that, they're blown away. And I was like, that's the beauty of what's going on. You're creating, like they call it, heat shock proteins as well, which comes up a lot. This is the creation of new cells. And I'm 40. I turned 40 in November last year. When you start turning 40, your body it denigrates in terms of the ability to create new cells. And there's very few things that actually help us create new cells past that age. And that's what heat shock proteins do. So you're actually creating new cells in your body as well. That's why things like longevity are impacted, because you're literally stimulating, keep yourself young, and you're creating new cells in the body. Like, how can you argue with that?
Okay. So what would you say to people out there? Like, what's been your most successful strategy of maybe attracting new clients, but even just trying to get them to come back, because I love what you're telling me. You're educating me about the whole experience and what it does for your body. So I would imagine educating them is a big piece, but yeah.
I would say, if I was to sum it up in one simple way, I would say like the Nimbus experience. And what I mean there is, we've always hung our hat on creating a space Yes, we have the saunas as the modality, the prime modality, but this transitions across everything that we do. Everything that we do is carefully curated and thought through from beginning to end. So that ethos of preventative living, but also real, like we're not trying to create something that is only achievable by a very few. And that would be a big gripe I have with the wellness industry generally. It's easy for anyone to go online and look at some super ripped guy or some fit woman who trains 5 times a day and eats these things and blah, blah, blah. But we don't all have that reality. We don't have that environment. We don't have that physiologically. We don't have that as a life. We don't have it in terms of our work. Like some people, that's their job. They don't have to do anything else and they're blessed to have that. But like if you have kids or you work a day job, stuff like that's just not a reality. So there is a bit of toxicity in the wellness industry around that. And then if you imagine the average Joe trying to achieve that, you're in this constant sense of like one-upping yourself to try and look like that. And that's a very tiny percentile, you know, of the general population. So I think there's a very fine line that you tread around promotion of wellness, yes, but making it real and achievable for everybody, not just that elite. And I think we do that very well in our experience. And what I mean there is like the minute you come into our studio, everything from what you see online digitally and things like that, right through to the products that we stock, the smell that you smell, the sounds that you hear. Like we create this amazing thing called Soundscapes, which is 45-minute sound journeys that you can listen to in the studio when you're in your sauna. Like absolutely every step of that has been carefully thought out of. If we find a product that isn't ethical or has changed our values, we just say goodbye to them. You know, we have a very rigorous protocol. And these are all these little 1%ers, but that's what goes into the mix of why people want to come to us and come back. And if you find yourself in a place like that, and look, we don't get it right all the time. You know, we make mistakes, people have bad experiences and we have to resolve them, but we learn from that as a team and we try to move forward. So we've always done that very altruistically. Like we've never tried to trodden on anything. We've never tried to grow too fast. And whilst wellness in general is growing very, very fast now, I still see when a new business pops up, which obviously has maybe a lot of backing or something like that, I kind of look at it and go, oh yeah, but I feel like they haven't really, like I still feel like not many brands get it. Like from what, to give you an example, like we've heard stories of things like, you know, you can go to one place where yes, they have an ice bath or something like that, but it's on show, you know, like this, everybody can see you getting in there. So if you're like, if you're a if you're a body conscious person trying to do an ice bath for the first time, and ice baths are not easy to get into, right? There is a fear factor.
Sure. Bit of emotion, I bet, going through it, like getting in it.
I don't know if I could do this. Your ego is at play, and everyone's watching me. Like I get that, and I'm doing that all the time. I still get it if I'm in a big group and someone look at me. Like I feel the pressure of people go, well, this guy should be able to do it at very cold, you know. So if I start shivering, people going, hey, you're shivering. You're the ice bath guy. So it happens to everybody. So I think like this, I hear stories like that all the time, and that's just one example of. I'm like, I don't feel like they truly get it, you know? We've always had privacy as a big kind of thing in our business model. And look, we're also a promotion of communal, and we're doing that with our brand now. We're expanding into more communal opportunities, like our latest studio in Neutral Bay as a communal room. So there's certainly a place for communal, absolutely. But there's a mix, there's a way in which you can deliver both, excuse me, in a way where people feel safe and comfortable. And when you do that, we have clients who've been with us since 2016, you know, almost 10 years, still coming every single week. And when people come into the studios, the stories and basically your guard comes down, because there's not many things in our day that you can do where your walls truly come down. Like, I mean, yes, you can do meditation, you can do a lovely yoga class or breathwork, you can do those things. But you are being stimulated by someone, a sound, music, a teacher, other people in the class. When you come in for a sauna, it's a very unique experience. You're in a box, within a room, within a studio. So you really have that 3 degrees of separation from the street. And people come in off a busy day and they can be in the worst mood, very short with our staff, you know, sometimes can be a bit OT.
In my room.
Yeah, get me. I'm late, or like, you know, I don't want to talk. You know, we like it's a Friday night. I've had a terrible week. It all happens, and then what? The magic that happens between when they arrive like that, and it's the number one thing actually that comes up in our client survey every year that people say that they love the most about us is the feeling they get when they leave versus from when they arrive. Now, that's not even tangible. You can't quantify that. You can't bottle that up. And I'm talking about skin health and digestive system and all-cause mortality. They're all great. But the number one thing that people get from it is that feeling. And if that doesn't sum up what it's like to be a human being, I don't know. And that's the magic stuff. That's the secret sauce. That's the invisible. We call that the invisible benefit. That's the other phrase that we have for it. And you can only create that not by one single thing. You've got to create it from everything. The people you hire, the colors that you choose on the wall, you know, the type of sauna that you use, you know, the in-sauna room guide that we have. We have a vanity station with free products for people to try. Like, it's literally all of those things. It's the sanitary products that we use in our bathrooms that are all complementary. But then if I go a layer deeper with that, it's also the brand that we choose to work with in that space. And not to go down a rabbit hole, but even in sanitary products, some will say they're natural and good for you, but they're actually, a lot of them can be quite toxic, you know? So we work with a brand called Fem Organic, where the whole process from the boxing to the packaging is completely organic material. Because if you're putting something on your body, you know, you don't want to be putting something in that's a toxic, you know, material.
You just absorb whatever.
It's literally from from A to Z, everything we do has to fall in line with our ethos and values. And look, as a business, that's probably held us back. It's probably meant our growth has been slow. Now, there's been others who have come after us who have been, you know, valued at $30 million online and things like that, who have grown very, very quickly. And that's all fine. There's plenty of room for everybody. But we feel like we're in it for the long game. You know, we're here to make people healthier. We're here to be real. Like, I eat burgers, you know, I drink alcohol, I do stupid things like, you know, my sleep isn't good, or my relationships might be like, I'm not this perfect human being, far from it. And I've always said that we're human beings, Sue and I, and we try and live our life like we would project out there into the general public. And coincidentally, I'm actually on a 3-month hell kick at the moment. So even though you saw me drinking and eating there, like, it's a decaf tea. That was like a raw snack that I had. Like, I'm basically doing like paleo, carnivore, keto, like no grains, like virtually no dairy. So I've been doing that for it's a 90-day challenge, and I think I'm 52 days in. So I'm
okay.
halfway. So I'm trying to also, you know, the reason why people say, well, why did you do that? And it's to that point I was talking about earlier. I wasn't perfect. I was at a stage where I was eating like Cadbury's chocolate bars like twice a day. Now I was training, and like, you know, I know I was like in good shape. You know, I was in relatively good shape. You know, I don't have a 6-pack body type thing, but you know, I always have trained. I was looking after myself. But we moved house to Brisbane. We used to live in Sydney for 10 years where we started. So we moved. We had like 3-year-old son and new daycare. The business was pretty busy and hectic with flying around. Like, I was like
new challenges.
Yeah, like I was pretty stressed. Like, Sue and I are both burnt out. Like, we're like totally burnt out. And I said, I have to, like, one thing I miss about corporate is having structure. You know, I am a structured person, so I like having my desk. I like coming in and having the same screen set up every day. I get really frustrated by, you know, I've got all my tech here in the background, but then, you know, the battery goes, and then I get frazzled, and then someone rings the doorbell, and then all of a sudden it's lunchtime. And then
where did my day go?
Where did my day go? Yeah. And then that compounds on you. And then you've got people ringing you going, I need this, I need that. Like, it does compound. And like, I left CBS like almost 3 years ago to go full time. You know, I was shadow directing kind of for the first 5 years. And then last 3 years I've been full time. So it's been a big shift. And when you have a child and move interstate, like, you lose all your independence. Like, it has been such a challenge. And both of us were just totally burnt out. And Sue, my wife, also has another business called Foil, which is an ethical refillable skincare brand. So not only do we have one business, but we've got two. So we've got 2 startups.
Okay.
You know, where we're putting, like, our whole livelihood is dependent on these businesses. They fail, we fail, you know, like, and that's the phase 3 of what we were talking about earlier on, is where we're in now, of this growth phase. Because we launched e-commerce only a year ago, it feels like we're back in startup mode again.
Okay.
And it also feels like we're only like, I say this kind of tongue in cheek, but it only feels like we're getting serious about it in the last year or two. And what I mean is like, we're really trying to grow the business so we can take it to another level. And that comes with a whole raft of risk and issues. And, we're trying to scale an e-commerce brand now. We sell sauna machines. That was the latest one. So we sell sauna machines into homes and corporates. And then the final piece of like our pillars, we have 3 pillars. We have the sauna studios, our e-commerce, and then the final piece is our B2B offering. So we're now doing consultation to businesses, because everybody in Australia, particularly, if there's a new build going on, residential or commercial, everyone's thinking about some kind of wellness level, because not only is it providing health benefit, but it's helping them sell their product. So whether you've got a $30 million penthouse, by putting a sauna and an ice bath in there, that could be the little thing that gets a buyer over the line. Like a $20,000 investment could get a $30 million buyer.
Yeah, so, new home, and I get to take care of my health, like starting now. I mean,
exactly.
That's a sale. That's a good sale.
That's the newest part of what we do, and that kind of scales up or scales down. That can come in and we just consult, help you design something, and you go and build it, or we can actually go and build it for you. So we've actually built 2 saunas for residents, high-end residential builds, where we started from zero. So we went in, got architects, designed it, and created it to fit in with a actual, person's home. And yeah, we're talking to some big tech brands about us actually being their wellness provider. Okay. And a lot of, like, there is some big brands that I won't name, but we're investing a lot of money in this space, which is great to see. But that doesn't mean it's going to work. You can put in a sauna somewhere, but have you thought about the flow? How are you going to do a booking system? How long is it going to be? How are you going to clean it? Is it next to showers? Are people going to have to walk through the office in a robe?
It's the schematics and like how everything's set up. Like you don't want a big maze to go around the corner and like to find the bathroom and then walk back. Kind of
exactly.
Like,
and then what happens if you've invested $100,000 into that space and now it's not working and nobody's using it? Then you're going to have to claw all that back. And we're coming across it with a lot of clients saying, hey, we already invested in this. Even some gyms and things like that, where like we really invested in float tanks, which are great from a modality point of view, but float tanks are quite challenging to operate because people do stupid things in float tanks. I won't spell them out, but you can imagine. Then you've got to drain them, replenish them with magnesium. There's a lot of education around it. There's a fear factor with it. There's a lot of work. So that's what I'm saying. You can put anything into anywhere, but what's the intention? And that's the first place we start with any B2B client, is like, what is the intention here? What is your goal? What are you trying to achieve? And that can vary greatly per business, because one business will say, we just want to get people back into the office.
Oh, okay.
Like Number 2 could be like
perk kind of thing to.
Yeah. Number 2 could
challenges.
Be like, people want like to focus on their health. Okay. And like the third thing is this, and because I'm writing a piece for a publication here about what's the latest trends, wellness, but this multifaceted living is coming and it's going to be here to stay. And what I mean by is, like, in the old days, you'd have your gym, you'd have your sauna place, you'd have your workplace. They're all very segmented. Whereas there's a rise now of this multifaceted living. So there's a gym that I operate out of in Brisbane called Total Fusion. They're amazing. And they have gym, yes, but they also have wellness there. They also have space for you to work. So I can spend 7 hours there and work. This whole club sphere is happening, where a club now is not just a country club where you come to work out. It's a club where you can actually make meetings, broker deals.
You can do everything there. You can have a shower, you can hit the gym, clean up,
host
do your
events.
meeting,
you can do a
little golf or whatever.
Yeah, like the gym that I'm in, they have a podcast room. So you can book a room and actually have your podcast in there, and it comes fully kitted out. So it's like
a co-working space, but they put a spin on it. They're like, no, we'll give you a private room that you can set up your podcast.
Yes. I would say it's more gym primarily, but with a co-working space, like, secondly, but they do it very, very well. They have a full kitchen. You can get steaks, all healthy food. Like, it's amazing. And that is definitely something that I'm seeing. And that, like, so imagine you're building a residential block on the Gold Coast here in Australia. If you've got 200 apartments going into that, you absolutely have to have a wellness level. You have to have a social level, because whether you're renting them or selling them owner and occupied, it's going to make your product so much more attractive than the next place. Now, there was another co-working space, so I won't name, we were getting legal trouble, but there was a co-working space that I was operating out of, which was a big brand 5-10 years ago, but they don't have any wellness offering there. And I was trying to say to the guys, like, hey, like, would you, like, investing in a sauna is not that big for a company. It's about, our prices start at 8,900, Australian, which is not much, right? And the value proposition is huge. You basically, if it was used fully for 2 weeks, you'd earn your whole money back. Versus if you came to, like, you can get about 100 people in a week with one single sauna. Now, to come to me, you might spend $60. So that just shows you the value you get back in just 1 week.
Yeah.
If you were to pay for that service. So the value proposition is huge. But then, I left that co-working space to go into this gym space because now I can do all those things in the one place and pay one fee.
Sure.
So that's definitely a thing I'm seeing as a trend. These clubs and spaces that do more. And also, the average worker nowadays wants more from their business. They don't want to just come and work and go home. They want to know that they care. So there's a duality to that. There's like, people want more from their workspace, but on the flip side, from a corporate, all the studies are there. Like Gallup released a study saying if you focus on your staff's overall wellness, your profits will go up by minimum 20%. So there's a fiscal benefit to companies. If you put a sauna, like,
Guaranteed you're going to add 20%.
exactly. And I'm not just talking about a LinkedIn or an Apple or whatever. You could be a 0 to 9 accountancy firm with, an older demographic. Why not put a sauna in there? At the very least, you're going to make your staff healthier beings. And if they're healthier beings and happier beings, what's going to happen? Productivity goes up. They're going to stay longer. Your retention's going to go up. You're going to attract new staff members.
They start bragging. Hey, I got this. Now more people want it.
Well, imagine an accountant. I'm not trying to hone in on accountants here to say that like it's a boring profession. Some people love numbers and that's fine. But imagine you're working in an admin in an account firm who has a sauna, and you're out chatting to your friends who, work in another accountancy firm, and they're like, what the hell? You guys have this that you can use it for free. And I shouldn't say this because it goes against my business, but then you don't need to come to Nimbus Co to have your sauna because you're getting it in your workplace.
In your workspace, yeah.
So that's kind of like where the latest part of where our business is at. So we're kind of evolving and adapting beyond the bricks and mortar studios. And I think they play a huge role. It's like the luxury brand. It's like, why is Gucci in Capri? They pay exorbitant rents to be in places like Capri, but the thing is they have to be there because that's where their high-end clients hang out. So they use some studios.
They go to spend money.
Yeah, exactly. But they might not even spend it in Capri, but it's a place for them to go and feel special. And they probably lose money on those sites, but it's a necessary tool for them to do. And I think it's the same. Our studios, when we started, we thought we were just going to be a sauna studio business, and maybe one day we'd have 200 of them. That was it. That was the dream. We also had a statement where we said we wanted to be a Coca-Cola, but for good, for health, to be a beacon of health across the world. And back then we laughed about it. We were like, how could we be everywhere like Coca-Cola? And even with studios, you can't be on every street corner. Like, that's impossible, right? But now that we have these products, we have a sauna blanket, which is another one. So we have everyday beauty range that anybody can, most people can afford or get access to. Then we have our mid-tier product, like our sauna blanket. Then we have a sauna machine, so you can put us in your home and your office. So it's like, you can have it, you can come to the studio if you live near us. You can buy our product and take it with you no matter where you go, or you can have a slice of us at your home or in your office. And even if that all fails, we can come to you and we can host something for you. So we do ice bath days and we do talks on fertility and sexual health.
You load them up on like a truck and then take everything to you. Is that what you mean?
That's definitely something, like a mobile sauna or having a pack that they're quite tricky to unpack, move, put up and host. And, there's a kind of a high
And there's
ticket.
a time frame too that you want. Each person probably needs to be able to.
Yeah, like that is something. And like often brands, when you actually give them a value, like, because it is quite a lot of work, they're kind of like, oh, I'm not really too sure. But what we're trying to do there is plug the gap with a mobile sauna that can be transported anywhere, and then festivals and events and even office spaces in a car park, like you could do all those kind of things. But but what I mean more so there is like we have a program called Wellness at Work. So we
Okay.
can, if health and wellness is a priority for your business, but let's say you don't have any space for a sauna, that's fine. Let's say you don't live anywhere near our studio, you live 5 hours inland, that's fine. We can actually come to you either in person or online. That's not me personally. If you want to, with our
Somebody on the
Nimbus,
team.
yeah, somebody on the team, or even if they're not on the team, we have practitioners that operate within most of our studios nationally
Oh,
across
okay.
all kinds of modalities. And just because of our network and community that we've built up over the 10 years. So whatever it is, like literally like the sky's the limit. And then Nimbus just kind of plays that quarterback role where it's like, how this works in practice, just to put it in context for you, is we approach a business and say, hey, what are you doing for your staff? They tell us what they want to do. Maybe they don't. Maybe they want us on it, but it doesn't work. Et cetera, et cetera. And we say, well, we can bring wellness to you. Here's our black book in terms of what we can offer. Now, it's not me personally, but no matter what you pick. So like, let's just pick facials as an example. We've hosted a facial day at a co-working space in Sydney across 2 days. Now, that wasn't us, but we have a practitioner who operates out of Byron. We flew her down. We hosted that for 2 days, back to back. Oh, I think we had like 100 people who had facials, and they absolutely loved it. We do massage days. We do talks on nutrition, workshops. We do eating disorders, like whatever is a priority for your staff. And that's what we always say, going back to what I mentioned earlier on. Like, what is the goal with this? What's your intention? And a lot of times brands don't necessarily know what that is. So you have to kind of help them with that. Second to that, if you want to go deeper, is like, are you actually asking them? Like, are you checking in with them at all? 9 out of 10 are not. And what I mean there is like, do you have some kind of survey? Like some brands will have a survey, but are you actually talking about their own personal, like, you don't have to go into details, but like, how are you asking about their health? Are they happy personally? A lot of brands are not doing that. What's your big wellness goal for the year? What are you doing well from your health? What are you doing poorly at your health?
It's always like financial, or what are you trying to do, or what goals are you trying to reach, but they don't always tie it
Yeah.
back to
A
like.
lot of the questions, if there is any questions, a lot of the questions we see is like, are you happy in the workplace? Is there anything that we could do better? So they're kind of generic, open-ended questions. But if you ask the question going, how is your personal health journey at the moment out of 10? It's a 5. Is there any areas of your health you're trying to focus on? Weight loss, skin health, digestive system, relationships, things like that. Then people answer all that anonymously. Now you know that nutrition is a big focus for this workforce, or they want to move their bodies more. Okay, well then, and then what I do is I take that and then I go, well, I have a library of things I can apply, but I'm not going to apply them until I know what's actually the value there. So if physical exercise is a priority, well then Pilates, yoga, a HIIT class, PT, things like that can be plugged in. But if emotional health is coming up, things like, how are your relationships at home? If 75% are saying they're below 5, well, we need to look at emotional health, sex life, finances, fertility story. Like fertility and finances are the biggest thing. Not finance is the biggest thing that impacts your emotional health, right? Or your stress levels. And I'm not at work, this is at home. So helping people to cope with financial stress is the big thing that we do quite regularly. Fertility is something that's come up quite a lot, that puts a lot of stress on couples. And then you take that into the workforce. And, sexual health is another thing, and relationships and all those kind of things, masculinity, femininity, all those kind of things. But if you as a business are addressing those needs in the workplace and providing a space for your employees to feel safe, heard, listened, like that is invaluable, in my opinion. Goes way
It's
beyond.
your ideal workplace. Like you want to go back to work. You know that they care, they listen, and
Yeah.
you're on a, you're just
And
on a
that goes
positive.
way beyond, when I worked in CBS, don't get me wrong, I had loads of fun, but that kind of Friday night lunch or Friday day, you go for lunch, you have a few drinks, and if things are going well, you don't have to come back into the office. And, like I do miss
Got
those
it
days.
done.
Yeah. You hit your sales targets. Like, it's like, where's the sales team? I don't know. They could be in Barbados for all we know.
Yeah.
Like I do, like, it's not that, they were fun times as well, but I just feel like both sides of the coin are arriving at the same place. Employees expect more from their employee than just a place to come and get free coffee. And employers, actually, if anything, I think employees are kind of more aware of what they want than companies. I still feel like companies don't get the fact that if you invest in your people, especially their wellness, you will get dividends out of that in the long run. I still feel like most businesses aren't in that space. Yeah, your LinkedIn's and those guys are investing in it. In CBS, we had a pretty substantial budget every year to focus on that kind of stuff. But the only thing I would say in that, yeah, it's not uncommon in those big kind of tech brands. But then the only point I would say there is like, who's leading it? Where's the structure coming from? Because quite often the person that is leading that is the HR person. And they don't, most of the time don't fully understand or have a clue really of what they should and shouldn't be doing. They're just kind of picking things and go, well, yoga or Pilates is good. Let's just host that, but if that's not their wheelhouse, how are they actually creating a program that works? And it goes back to me, and also based off what the staff want. So I think 90% of businesses are not following those steps. It's very basic stuff, but people are throwing money away at the wrong things, in my opinion.
Kind of just guessing, will this work? Will this work? Let's talk about maybe one mistake that you made or someone made on the team, or just something that really kind of, just taught you a valuable lesson that could potentially help our listeners.
Sure. I think the biggest mistake when you go into like growth phase, we possibly overextended ourselves for a period about 2 years ago when we were like, it all kind of ties in when I started to go full time in the business. But when you start to grow, you have to be, especially if you're bootstrapped, family owned, you got to be very careful. And the big thing that we came against was cash flow, and which is happens a lot with many businesses when they go into the growth phase. And we nearly went under, on several occasions because of that. And to give you an example and put it in context for listeners, so I'm Irish, if people haven't guessed that already, but I live in Australia. My Irish friends think I sound Australian.
You have a blend mix.
I have a blend, yeah. I definitely slowed down and I pronunciate a little bit more.
Yeah.
I actually had one of my early mentors, Jack, out of Melbourne, who were still very good friends. He pulled me aside when I first came to Australia. I was working in PR at that time. And he said, mate, you can't talk and write the way you are. I said, what do you mean? Because it just, whatever the cultural thing from Ireland, the way I spoke, I was fast. I was writing a bit too casually. He said, you need to, if you want to be taken seriously here, you're going to have to adapt. And I was like, you can't tell me that,
Yeah.
But he was right. That was one of the best lessons I ever learned was like, not to avoid being Irish. Like being Irish is a huge asset. I absolutely adore being Irish and it's made me who I am. But sometimes you have to kind of work with your environments in order to be treated
culture. Sure. Yeah. It's like having, the respect for who you are, but also like where you are, where you live and your surroundings and, just it's both ways.
People see that. And like, Irish people have a great working ethic as well. And if you work hard, I would say Irish people have a stronger work ethic than Australians do. Like when I first came here, I couldn't realize how relaxed it was. In a good way, like if you need to go to the dentist,
move to the right place.
Yeah, if you need to go to the dentist, you're like, hey, I got to go to the dentist tomorrow. Yeah, no worries. Yeah, we'll see you then. Whereas in Ireland, I used to have to put in like timesheets by the hour. So my boss would be like, how long are you going to be gone for? I'd be like 3 hours. I'd have to knock 3 hours off. Yeah. And that would come off my paycheck or else I'd have to work.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So like, it was a lot stricter there, and you could the dress code and everything, and then Friday lunches. But so like I've had amazing mentors along the way, I will say. But yeah, that overextension, and that was just out of naivety, I suppose. And the example I was going to use was going back to those phases that I mentioned. We had like Bondi, then we had Melbourne, we had the license in Byron, then we had Manly, we had kind of 4 studios. It started to feel like we were getting a little bit bigger, and I'm Irish, and we've always wanted to put something in Ireland because saunas are still a seasonal thing. We're busier in the winter, we're not as busy in the summer kind of thing. Whereas Ireland or the UK is cold a vast majority of the year. Some would say maybe 9 months of the year. So it made a lot of sense to kind of put Nimbus in the UK. So we about 3 years ago had a trip to Europe, and we were over there for 2 or 3 months. That was some of the pros of being your own business owner. We could go home and spend time with my family and my child and all that. You can do things like that. You can remote work and stuff like that. But we did a trip to the UK. Our mentor, who was actually an Irish person over here, taught us this lesson of like, he warned us about over capitalizing and over expanding. But it's easy to kind of in the moment not think you're spending that much money. But we went to Europe, we had a few meetings with UK firms. We started to kind of start putting the groundwork in for a franchise setup in the UK. We started speaking to lawyers and spending time and trips. And then we were like putting franchise document, doing trademark searches. And then all of a sudden, like, you come home, the dust settles, you start getting bills. It starts, it all adds up. And then all of a sudden it was like £20,000, then, it was 5,000 extra for this. And then all of a sudden you're putting your main business under cash restraints. So I think that was an example of like, shit, we tried to like, be a bit too frivolous with it. And then all of a sudden it was actually impacting the day-to-day operations of the business.
Yeah, you have to be a little more picky about, well, do we have funds for this or that, where you might have
and
no
then
problem got that covered.
And then the second part of that is probably just being a bit more macro prepared, like as in when you're in the business landscape, right? You're trying, any opportunity comes around, you're like, oh, that's a good opportunity. Let's take it because it could be the thing that sets us into the next level, right? And I'm the worst at this. My wife Sue is way better at this. I'm trying to learn it, and I'm having mentors and her and other people trying to drill this into me. It's from a good place, but what happens is when you put your hand up or try and do things, you get spread too thinly. And that's the worst thing that can happen to you as an entrepreneur, because it takes you away from the big picture stuff that's actually going to grow the business. So yeah, we get approached all the time by collaborations, and sometimes they're amazing. This is a brand that, wow, this could be a really good partnership for us. But by us even saying yes, that unlocks a whole raft of time and energy and resources from me and my staff and things like that. Even we get a lot of requests about donations of like products at big events, where the demographic is perfect for us, but it's like that all has a value, like, and
there's still money there. It's still money you paid for. Yeah.
And a big lesson I learned is like, someone goes, oh, I want to have 50 beauty body oils. Okay, yeah, that's a great business, that's a great event, let's do it. But then, it was my wife that said to me, yeah, but like, we got to attribute the cost of that across 50 units. Then all of a sudden, that's a $3,000 exercise.
Yeah.
And that was a real wake-up call for me going, oh, shit, like I'm actually giving away tens of thousands of dollars of products. And look, part of that sampling or seeding and things like that is part of the marketing mix. I get it. But what we were doing is we were kind of doing it more reactively rather than proactively. So it was only really at the turn of this year that we sat down and said, we are not going to say yes to anyone that comes in. We're going to be way more strategic about, yes, we'll have a place for some of those things once or twice a year, but we're going to do it intentionally. And that was a big thing as well, because you can't, like as a founder, like not to sound arrogant, but you're like gold dust, it's like, you've got the vision, you're trying to make this thing a thing. If I'm getting caught up in some discount voucher code and, it's just ridiculous. It's actually embarrassing. It's embarrassing when I actually recount those kind of things. So the art of saying no is probably the toughest lessons that I've personally had to learn in this. And, when you come from PR and working, because my whole corporate life was working across multiple clients, I could have 40 clients. So I've always been trained in the art of like managing all those things. And I did it very well and gave me a lot of success. But when you go into your own business, it's probably a terrible skill set to have. So I'm kind of like jump on inbox, work really quick. I remember an old boss that I had who I ended up becoming the 2IC before I went to CBS. He said to me, if you want to do something good, give it to a busy person. So, and when you get things done, people start giving you more things because you're saying yes. Whereas if you say no, people go, oh, he's like, here's a great example, right? And this has only been like, this is when you start getting into the good areas. But only recently I had someone reach out to me saying, hey, Neil, it was a friend of a friend from a potentially conflicting, like, I don't want to go into too much detail, but they had another wellness type business. we were talking about doing saunas, but they went off and did their own thing, which is fine. You know, that's up to you. Then they came back 6 months later saying, hey, wondering, can we have some like time for you to help us make our sauna offering a bit more efficient? And I was kind of, the old me would be like, you know, sure, whatever. But now I'm like, well, no, like, no, not from just a principal point of view, but it's like, I need to value my own time. I don't have enough time to be doing anything. And so I went back politely and said, look, I can't, the only gigs that I'm taking on that are new have to be paid gigs because I can't afford to give away my time anymore. Time is
Pulling
money.
you out of the business. Yeah. It takes
Exactly.
away
If I do this, it might take, in theory, it seems like, oh, just have a quick meeting, have a coffee, buy tea, it's all fine. But that could be a day of my time. Now, if I was to charge out my hourly rate or my daily rate, that's thousands of dollars I'm just giving away, you know.
Yeah.
So I said no politely and said, look, but then they reacted quite aggressively. That was quite rude, you know, et cetera, et cetera. Like, it's only a meeting. And again, the old me
Paid
would have,
consultation, if you want to turn that around. I'll give you 30 minutes, but yeah. Okay.
that's what I mean. I offered that, but that wasn't, you know, and like, I'm kind of friends and friends. And so I get that, like, you know, we're kind of friends, but it was also like the old me would have been a bit more pandering to the, oh, well, you know, whereas I was like, look, I'm sorry, guys, but like, you know, I have a business. I don't have the time for myself. I can't allocate that time. I'm sorry, but it's a no. And, you know, that upsets people and that's fine. But that also felt very good, not in the sense of like winning that or anything. It just felt good in the sense that I was finally prioritizing myself and our business, which ultimately waterfalls down to the prioritization of your family, your wife, your relationship, your son, his future, their future. Like it all has a knock-on effect. So now I'm very careful about, which is why I'm here with you, Scott, you know, very careful with like who I lend my time because it's an energy exchange. And I'm not a woo-woo person. I said that at the beginning,
Yeah.
but I'm really starting to understand that everything is an energy exchange. You know, even me being on this for an hour, I'm giving away an hour of focused energy, which is an hour from something else. And when you start thinking about that as a business owner, I feel like that's only truly where you're actually, now you're ready to succeed. And even with the whole nearly coming to bankruptcy several times and being bailed out and being against the wall, only when you're against the wall do you realize I've got to make this a success because if I don't, I'm done. And that's what I like about this last few years it's been very stressful and I wouldn't wish it on anybody. It feels like now we're only really starting to get serious with it. So this year feels like a real year of abundance in the sense of like, we're finally really honing in on what our business is and how to execute it efficiently.
Okay. I'll end with one last question. What advice would you give to someone, you know, just starting out with their wellness business, all the things that you learned and the challenges?
Don't do business with your partner
Okay.
unless your relationship, it's like don't have a kid if your relationship is waning. Don't start a business if your relationship is waning. I mean, there is a bit of truth to this. Like I wouldn't recommend doing it unless you're rock solid. Unless you have a real strong relationship, do not do it. The other thing to that I would say is if you're both the same type of person, I don't know if that's going to work. Like the good thing about Sue and I is we are very different. So it kind of in a weird way works. We both have our things that we bring to the table that are very different. We're aligned creatively and ethos and, you know, values, but we bring totally different ideas. Like I couldn't do Nimbus without her, and hopefully she'd say the same about me. But like the products and the formulation, all that, I couldn't do without her. So look, if you've got that mix, go for it. But buyer beware.
Okay.
Other little things I would say would like get a mentor. Like mentors have
That's
helped
huge.
me so much, not just in business but in life. As I mentioned, Jack, you know, who I first met in Melbourne. I've had so many mentors over the years and still have them today. We have an amazing kind of core mentor that we work with who's just, we would be lost without him because when you're in it by yourself and even your wife, you're so ingrained in it that you need someone, and our mentor grills us. Like it's not all rosy gardens. Most of the time I go into those meetings like shitting myself, like, you know, like
What are
sorry
you going
for
to tell us?
Yeah, what's the reaction going to be today? But like, honestly, if we didn't have that, I don't think we'd be here today. Simple as that.
Okay.
And I've done some things where he's properly grilled me, you know, even directly towards him, where I've had to learn some pretty hard lessons through the whole process, where your whole ego is shot to pieces, you know, and I've cried, you know, like but it's kind of lessons that I needed to learn. And like, I've been very, very lucky. And a lot of people say, well, how do you get your mentors? The hard answer to that is there is no silver bullet, you know. You find like, you can go to events and reach out to people and stuff like that. That can work, but you've got to just work in your own parameters, as in, like, sure, go to some networking things, but like, you just have to foster those relations organically and naturally. And that's what we've done with all our mentors. Like, if you put energy in, you'll get it out. And, you know, I met one of my mentors through my soccer team. He was on the board of directors, and we had a corporate thing where he was like, meet the players, and we connected, and then we went for some coffees and things like that. And it took years of that nurturing, because you got to sound each other out, right? You got to realize, is this guy for me, or is she for me, or vice versa? Like, do I even I've had a lot of amazing people who I've had some meetings with, but they kind of say, you know, I just don't know whether I can provide that much value for you. Or I've had other people who are like,
Fair enough.
Yeah, I've had other people who are like, you know, I got a meeting with this, you know, big millionaire, and you think, oh my God, this is it. Like, and then he's like, look, I like what you're doing, but it's not for me. And then you're like, you know, you feel tiny. But like, I've gone through all of those things.
Okay.
So you really have to find someone that's invested in you as much as you and them. Like, you can't like, the Chamber of Commerce is a great place to go. So I'm in the Irish Chamber of Commerce, and I had a mentor in Sydney who was a successful Irish female agency owner, and I got invaluable support for her, but it was under a very structured time frame.
Okay.
So though there are things like that which are definitely good, but just get out there, have coffee.
He is a mentor, and get out there, network.
But a mentor is definitely. And then I suppose the last thing would be, you know, take a chance, yes, but, you know, make sure you do have some parameters and safety nets in there. Like, you know, like, we've had support from family members. Like, we've dug ourselves out of holes on numerous occasions. So I do believe in that failure, and you got to push yourself, and, you know, 2 feet first kind of thing. And you're going to have all these problems. Like, we've been through it all. But if we didn't have that network around us, I don't know if we would have made it. Like, there's been some hairy moments where I've gone to bed going, I don't know how we're going to get out of this, like, financial situation. And, you know, we have had family support in certain times, and people who believed in us. But if people believe in you, people will invest in you. And you have to keep a positive mindset, you know, even if the worst thing happens. Often when we get terrible things happen to us, things positively come out of nowhere. You know, like, some big opportunity comes, or some big deal, and we're like, it's the exact value to what we would have had to pay over here. And you're kind of going, how? Yeah. Like, it's very...
At the same time, you wish that you didn't have this bad thing or whatever happening, where like this new thing would just like propel you. You just have extra, but you're like, okay, that canceled out this one. Okay.
And it happens both ways. Sometimes you can have this really bad thing happen, like your car breaks down. It's like a $10,000 bill. And you're like, oh my God, how am I going to pay this? But then randomly a $10,000 client comes. You're like, oh my God. And it would be nice to have that $10,000 directly into the business, but like, I'll take it if it pays for the car. But I am serious with that, because for me personally, I struggle with mental health as well, depression, anxiety, and panic attacks. And I was also a negative thinker, you know, like, you know, I had imposter syndrome, and always thinking I could have done better. And why isn't my business like that business? How is he or she doing this? And I fight with that daily. Like, it's a big thing that I have to deal with. But if you put out negative energy, and this has only been in the last, and I've been exploring my own mental health for at least the same time we've had Nimbus. But if you put out negative things, that gets, like, your subconscious mind doesn't know the difference between what's real and what's not. So if you say it out loudly, or even internalize it mentally, oh, you could have done better, you could have said this on Scott's podcast, that's just being digested by your body, your nervous system.
Yeah, it's going to take a toll on.
Exactly. So I'm trying to really shift that mindset of going, like, so what? Like, if things go wrong, so what? Like, if we go bankrupt, so what? Like, not to use Donald Trump as any kind of, like, positive reference, but like he's been bankrupt, I think 6 times. And now he's the president of the United States of America. So even if you remove any kind of personal, attachment to that, like it just shows you can be. He also had a famous saying of like where he met a beggar on the street, and he said he was on a date or something. He said something like, "See that beggar? He's $900 million better off than I am," because he was so much in debt at one point. But it just shows you like, and even if you did go bankrupt, now I have to say this with a bit of caution, but I'd try to prepare myself mentally and physically to potentially go bankrupt. And why I did that is like, you have to kind of be okay with it in order to be able to use it for good. And if you go bankrupt, so what? Like we're lucky we have family here. We have a network around us. That might not always be the case with people. And that's why I want to say that carefully. But I think of myself like, I live in Australia. I've got wonderful wife, in-laws. Even if all that failed, I've got my family back in Ireland. I could go back to Ireland. There's so many things you can do. And even if you had none of that, luckily in Australia, you've got welfare. Like I could go on welfare. I could find a home and I could live.
You're going to be okay.
I could be okay.
You could be all right.
Yeah, you could be all right. And even if that did happen, who knows what idea let's say Nimbus didn't work. We went bankrupt. The whole thing fell asunder, whatever. I could go on welfare. Who knows? I could meet someone and then all of a sudden a new idea would come and then change your mind. And that's what a lot of businesses have actually come out of, is failure of one leads to the success of another. So when you get to that space and that mindset, then literally you're bulletproof, because you're like, well, so what? If it goes under, it goes under. And you've got nothing to lose now. And that's a space, I think, for any entrepreneur that you want to get into. And like Elon Musk, I don't know why I'm using these as an example, but Elon Musk with SpaceX, what was the famous thing? He was down to their last test with the reusable rockets, and it landed. And then if that had failed, it would have been gone.
That's it.
So literally, like you might look at all these people out there in those worlds and think, well, they have their success. And most of them are just like you and I. They didn't have a clue what they were doing. They came to the brink. They nearly went bankrupt. They begged, stole, and borrowed to get where they are. There was an article I read the other day about, it was an open letter about 10 years into a business, and it was a letter to their own self about how proud they are of not giving in, having resilience. And that's probably the biggest strength I've built, is I'm one fucking resilient motherfucker. Sorry for all the language, but
keep fighting.
Yeah, it's like Snoop Dogg, when he did that speech of saying, I want to thank me. And like, I do want to thank me.
I stuck through it.
Yeah, I want to thank me. It's like the amount of shit I've had to go through, the stress that you carry every single day,
I love it.
Paying people's salaries, dealing with cats coming on podcasts. Like there's
you gotta keep the cats off of this one.
Yeah, there's so much stuff that you have to bear, and you're still here and still fighting. Like that's just a real sense of pride that I certainly have 10 years in. Who knows what that will be like in 10 years' time.
Well, thank you, Neil, for sharing your valuable insights and experience with us today. Tell people, how can they find you or connect with you?
Yeah, so we are online. We have a website, nimbusco.com.au. You can find us on Instagram and TikTok, are kind of the two social platforms. Our handle is at the Nimbus Co. So THE, the Nimbus Co. And we do a little bit on LinkedIn and stuff, but really Instagram and TikTok is where we're at. But yeah, find us on our website. We have a journal and a newsletter and things like that. So we do a lot of good stuff education wise. Studios, we have now 7. I didn't even talk about our acquisition, but we were 4 studios. You might have heard at the top of the podcast, but we're now 7. So we acquired a competitor at the end of last year, which wasn't on our agenda. So last November, like 3-4 months ago, we heard the news, we inquired, didn't have any spare money, but we were like, well, I talked about it about where there's a will, there's a way. You find money and so we've acquired 2 new studios, which brought us up to 6. And then we have our 7th studio in Fitzroy in Melbourne, which is launching in the next 2 weeks. So we're on the east coast of Australia. We're in Sydney, Melbourne, and Byron Bay for now. We don't want to be everywhere. That's not really we're a boutique brand, but we want to be we're living in Brisbane now. There's Hobart in Tasmania is pretty cold, There's maybe a couple of others are on Gold Coast. So, we want to expand, but we do have goals of going internationally, now that we also have our products, Asia, Europe, and, the UK specifically, and America at some point, whether it's through our sauna blanket or our everyday beauty range or the sauna machines. It's not as simple as trying to sell overseas, because even at a beauty product perspective, the EU has very strict rules versus the US and things like that. That's kind of more a 3 to 5 year goal. If we could have, our products, at least our products, if not our studios, if we had our products available in countries around the world, that would be awesome. Because then, going back to that analogy of being a Coca-Cola,
Yeah.
like if we could actually be in people's homes all around the world in some shape or form, that's it. We'll have made it, in my opinion. And we also do content as well. So like, even if you're living in Ireland or Singapore or India or Sri Lanka, wherever you are in the world, everyone has a mobile phone. So we are looking to invest more in that space of, we have PDF guides and video content, and I talk about fertility and sexual health. Like, we are trying to also become a trusted voice in that education space. So hopefully, if someone can't afford a very expensive fertility expert, they could watch our 40-minute video for free on our website and learn some very basic steps. So that's the big dream. So hopefully one day, wherever you are listening to this, we'll be able to at least have our products available in your region.
Excellent. Well, thank you all for joining us on the Wellness Growth Show. If you enjoyed this episode, please follow the Wellness Growth Show on Spotify, share it with wellness professional networks. And until next time, keep growing and transforming lives through wellness.